I was muted for the same.
Okay. Thanks for your patience. I
Right.
think we've got that managed, so I appreciate everyone waiting while we worked through that issue.
Technology or.
All right, and you're recording, Commissioner Ayala, in this meeting, I do believe we are operational.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Well, thank you everyone for your patience. We apologize. We're experiencing some technical difficulties, so we're getting a little bit of a late start this evening. It is 5:43, and I will call this meeting of the Port of Olympia Commission to order. Let's see, Commissioner Harding, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much. I will note the absence of, the excused absence of Commissioner Tong. We wish her well, and hopefully she'll be back at our next meeting. So we have an agenda before us today. Is there a motion to approve today's agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
I would like to make an amendment to the agenda, moving item I1 to after item F1.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. And now we have a motion to amend the agenda, by moving item I1 where, I'm sorry,
After F1, after Mark Daly's presentation.
after F1. Is there a second for that amendment?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend the agenda by moving advisory calendar number 1 item to up to pending issues behind the Thurston Regional Planning Council's presentation. Is there any discussion on the amendment?
I would just like to note that we will be taking public comment, as that will still be an advisory item. And we're just doing so out of respect for our guests, who we try not to have to force sit through our internal presentations.
Any other comment? Discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote on the amendment. The amendment is to move item I1 to up to F, pending issues or business, making that number 2. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have an amended agenda in the motion and second. Yes, we're done. All right, very good. We're good for the evening. We have an agenda. So now we can move into public comment. Individual public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Members of the public may comment on agenda items and other port business. Guidelines for public comment can be found in the commission rules and resolution 2022-09, Article 6. Comments should be directed to the commission as a whole and should not include comments about individual port staff or members of the public. All speakers shall be courteous in language and demeanor and shall confine remarks to those facts that are germane and relevant to the question or issue under discussion. Is there anyone signed up for public comment this evening? Is there anyone on Zoom? Public comment?
Commissioner Down, or
Oh,
Yes.
Commissioner Downing.
Carla Wolfsburg would like to speak.
I'm not sure.
Okay,
Sorry.
can we get Carla right after former Commissioner Downing? Yes, all right, you have the floor, sir.
Good evening. Good evening, commissioners. Do I have a timer? Anyway,
Got you ready.
Can I get a 30-second? Anyway, first of all, it's great to see everybody. I'm so embarrassed. This is only my second meeting since I retired, but Joe Downing, former Port Commissioner, Olympia, Washington. It's great to see you. It's great to see the 5 of you are staying out of trouble other than the other 5-person body. But really, I'm here to talk about KGY building. And I can't believe that just a quick, this is a very off the cuff comments, but I can't believe that lease is up at the end of this year. I thought it was up at the end of next year. In any case, time is short for a resolution of that issue. The building is on 25 or so pilings, and it's on the verge of becoming perhaps some sort of historical status. I understand from news reports that it has a statewide historical status, but not local. Your own Warren Hendrickson is working on a structural analysis. So I hope that that happens pretty quick, because we've dealt with a lot of leases over the years, and not all leases are the same. The nomenclature and the verbiage is quite the same, but sometimes you get into issues when you have buildings that have had a lease for over 50 years, like KGY. There are other issues sometimes when a piece of land, such as the used to be called the Simon Johnson building, when it changes hands in the middle of a lease, then there are issues. But in any case, this has been around a long time. So I would suggest a little bit of negotiation, because the lease on the one hand says, please bring the land back to bare ground at the end of the lease. Well, that's really nice to have that in there. And that's important, I think, to have that in there, because we're leasing the ground and we don't want to have to do cleanup or what have you with that land. But I think that given this particular situation and the public interest in it, I'd love to see some middle ground accomplished with the present owner, KGY. I'd like to see some middle ground, and I'd be happy to see the port take over that building, assuming the structural analysis pays off. And I hope that this commission can come up with some ideas on how to use that building. I personally am not so in favor of any kind of hotel or motel out on the point. I think something that benefits more the community, and it's been mentioned to me, perhaps a brew pub, another type of restaurant, which you could say it complements Anthony's, because Anthony's, if you haven't been there lately, it's a pretty expensive place to sit down for dinner with you and your spouse or friends or what have you. And so a brew pub would be something different and appeal to a different class of people. And yet it would utilize the point quite a bit. So I'm very in favor of that, but I mostly encourage this commission to come up with your own ideas. So many times, and myself included, sit back for 8 years and ideas come to us, and then we either approve or reject or what have you. Or so I'd be so pleased for this commission to somebody to spearhead an idea, push it forward, and accomplish something in regard to the KGY. So anyway, I hope you're happy with the 5-person commission. It was a big thing for me to try to work with the county to push that through. So I hope you're happy with that. It feels good. It feels good. I think the port's doing great. And I want a big shout out to the marine terminal. I was looking at the packet, and the first 6 months of 2024, really exceptional. So I'm thrilled. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Downing. Did you say Carla Wolfsburg wanted to?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Wolfsburg, you have the floor.
Thank you, commissioners. I hope you can hear me. My name's Carla Wolfsburg. I live in Tumwater. And I'd like to talk about the issue that was presented to you by Mr. Hendrickson at your August 12th meeting. It's about the capital budget amendment of $1 million for a new 50,000 square foot warehouse at the Marine Terminal. And I understand this is going to come before you as an action calendar item for a vote at your September 23rd meeting. So historically, the port has made investments that lack sufficient financial research or a commitment from customers, each of which were ended up as unprofitable. An example is one that Mr. Hendrickson pointed out, the $3 million crane purchased in 2014 for cargo that failed to materialize, his words, And rail cars were another bad investment for the marine terminal, which, like the crane, are also being surplused. So as Mr. Hendrickson pointed out, there is no commitment in writing from the company Suzano. No commitment that they'll be delivering cargo at the rate he quoted for the next 5 years to pay off this proposed warehouse. So I'm just really concerned that, there are no customers in the wings and there's no firm commitment in writing from anyone at this point to justify the investment. And I did not hear commissioners ask for any alternatives to the port building a warehouse. For example, Suzano could lease or purchase an offsite storage or possibly even secure a ground lease at the marine terminal, where Suzano or another investor constructs, owns, and maintains and insures the warehouse. So I'm concerned that the financial burden is once again falling on the public and the port. And this really feels like speculation at this point, a great deal of speculation. In addition, I did some research about the so-called green product of eucalyptus pulp, which I would be happy to share with you at some point. Environmentalists and other critics challenge Suzano's claims of environmental sustainability, and the controversy includes Suzano's expanding monoculture of eucalyptus forests that pose dangerous fire threats. Whole communities have been wiped out. It's a very dangerous fire threat of this particular tree. There's a significant decrease in groundwater for native species in agriculture, and a decrease in biodiversity that, unlike native forests, eucalyptus forests provide little habitat for animals, and they don't sequester carbon like native forests. So these have all been concerns, have all been reported about eucalyptus plantations in Portugal, Brazil, India, Bangladesh, and the United States, where this tree has been imported from their native Australia. So in conclusion, I would just hope that you do more research, demand a commitment in writing from Suzano, and possibly research other options for warehouse storage so that you do not vote to amend the capital budget at this time for this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wolfsburg. Is there any other public comment this evening? Pardon me?
Suzanne.
Oh, okay. Mr. Cezanne, you have the floor. I can't see anything and we're not hearing you, Mr. Cezanne.
New Reiner as well, who she's got her hand raised.
All right, Mr. Cezanne, we can try to come back to you. Ms. Reiner, how about you try and give your public comment?
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, I also had some questions regarding some of the activities of the Port of Olympia. I know that when we, the Port of Olympia commissioners hired Alex Smith a number of months ago, that we had a great big public gathering there in the port offices, and there was a lot of discussion. A large segment of the population showed up. Everyone was very excited about the vision and the future of the Port of Olympia, and we were promised public work sessions. We have not really had a public work session of that nature, even though it was promised some months ago. I know that we keep wanting to have a overall plan of what is going to happen on the isthmus, but then the port keeps voting for these things to go on the isthmus, and we haven't had the master plan put into place or really constructed as yet. It seems like we're not following a logical pathway to look at the isthmus and the future of the isthmus. We just keep voting for these things and putting them into play, and we're not really sequentially allowing this to happen logically. So I merely ask for public work sessions so the public can go through these issues of the isthmus with the hearing the commissioners. I know that Alex Smith had promised us to also bring in Department of Ecology folks to the public work session. I also think that would be very, very helpful. We have the $200 million Bud Inlet cleanup coming before us. And there are many in the community who have spent their life dealing with environmental issues, have a lot of questions regarding this cleanup. I know there was talk about using the toxic spoils that are going to be dredged up from Bud Inlet. And then the proposal was to pile them on the isthmus and then build buildings on top of this toxic substances. I think the science is not there yet. I don't think that future generations will appreciate having these toxic components dumped on the isthmus for sea level rise for future generations. So my hope is that we will have work sessions to discuss these things with port staff and Department of Ecology as was promised to us. And I know the port commissioners have also said they wanted to have public work sessions. So I don't know who's putting together the agenda, but I hope we can do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Reiner. Does Mr. Saison want to try again?
Yeah, he was. Okay. Yes, he can.
Mr. Saison, we'll go ahead and try and make your statement. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Saison, but we are unable to hear you. Is there anyone else who would like to give public comment?
Yes.
All right, thank you then. We will move on to the consent calendar.
Motion to approve the consent calendar as presented in the agenda.
We have a motion to approve the consent calendar. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. There's two items on the consent calendar: recommendation of the federal lobbying services by Propolis contract amendment, and then minutes from July 22nd, 2024 and August 12th, 2024. We have a motion and a second. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There are none, so motion passes. Now we can move on to pending issues or business. And first up, we have a briefing from Thurston Regional Planning Council. Neil St. Ange, Director of Strategic Initiatives and Commission Affairs, and Mark Daly, Executive Director of the Thurston Regional Planning Council. Mark?
Good evening.
Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Quick logistics. Do I control or yes? Okay, thank you. Beautiful. Thank you. All right. Good evening. I'm Mark Daly. I'm the Executive Director at Thurston Regional Planning Council. And I really appreciate the time this evening. I've been talking a lot with Executive Director Smith, with Commissioner Harding. We've been looking for opportunities to strengthen the relationship, strengthen the working relationship between Thurston Regional Planning Council and the Port of Olympia to try and help us better support the port in its work going forward. And this is my first time providing a briefing to you all since you moved to 5 commissioners. So very quick, just a little bit of who we are. And also for context, when talking with Executive Director Smith, the idea for this evening is we have a lot of work going on at TRPC and a lot of work that definitely has direct ties to Port of Olympia. And so tonight it is really just kind of an introduction to kick off to a number of the things that we're working on now and that we will be in the coming year or two, where we're going to want to make sure we're really closely aligned as we do that work. So who is Thurston Regional Planning Council? We're a voluntary organization that is set up in state law for a county or counties to come together to work on issues across jurisdictional boundaries. And so we are just for Thurston County, but the members of our organization are the county, all the cities, tribes, the special purpose districts like the Port of Olympia, school districts, all the kinds of leadership organizations that kind of make our region tick are members of TRPC. And what we're primarily working on is the big thing that brings people to the table is money. And there are federal and state funds that flow through Thurston Regional Planning Council to be programmed on local projects. And so, for example, we've got a call for projects that we're doing right now, looking at transportation projects out a few years and programming almost $20 million in projects just for the Thurston region. And it's our policy board and council that makes those decisions. Our bread and butter is really around transportation, around land use. We have a role in growth management planning for our region, and also environmental planning. For example, we supported Thurston County and the Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater in creation of the climate mitigation plan that for our region. So there's quite a breadth of things that we're working on. And it's been, if there's one thing that people take from this, is we are a big repository for data. If you've never looked at the profile, I encourage people to do that. The quickest way to get there is if you just Google TRPC, the profile, it's the first thing that comes up. There is so much information on here, statistics about our region, employment, our population, education, economics. We're kind of that repository for our region's information, and we have a long-term record. All of that can be accessed on our webpage. So a really good resource for our area, and probably our most used piece of information that we produce, and we update that every year. Some of the big things that we're working on, we lead the regional transportation plan for our area. It's important because it coordinates across our jurisdictions, but again, it's also what allows us to get state and federal funding. We have to have these kinds of planning documents in place and approved by the state and federal government so that we can access federal and state transportation funds. So we update this plan every 5 years. We're in the middle of an update right now that's scheduled to be done in July of 2025. And so this is going to be an important time for us working with all the members on what are the things related to transportation, including air transportation, that we are planning for our region over the next 20 to 25 years. And so especially on when it comes to air and water movement of freight in particular and people, we're going to want to make sure we're really plugged in with Port of Olympia on that. Part of this is part of what supports the update of our plan is a transportation model. We have a really sophisticated transportation model. I won't go into great detail about this. It's just an important tool that we have that's good to know that it exists because it gets used a ton. Our entire network is programmed in this, including adjacent land uses, so that we can look at how our transportation system functions today. And also we can use that to project out 20 or 25 years and how do we expect our system to function in the future. A real world example of this, and actually I didn't know the timing when I put this slide together, but just recently, we get a ton of requests to use this data. And we had one recently from City of Olympia and Department of Enterprise Services to take a look at some proposed transportation changes associated with the Deschutes Estuary restoration, where, does this have a pointer? I guess actually everyone can't look at the same thing. If you see that little circle at the little roundabout on the transportation system just at the north end of the lake, that isn't there today. That is one of the solutions that's being proposed to help when we remove the dam and move people. Well, our model helped show something that when you see it makes sense, but we didn't see it until we had it modeled, which was when we do that little roundabout at the base of the hill, and now people can make a right turn, where if you can picture that, people can't make a right turn now coming down the hill. It pulls a whole lot of trips that would go through downtown onto Deschutes Parkway instead. And those are people looking to get on I-5. It's a good way to access those northbound and southbound on-ramps. Once you see it, it makes total sense. But until we mapped it and really did the scenario, we hadn't recognized that. Really, really powerful tools. Right now, we're working on emergency detour routes. Very important for moving goods and people through our region. We've identified, working with a whole host of partners, almost 50 detour routes. And we looked at what happens if we have some sort of disruption at this point? What happens if we have it at this point? And just looking at all of the different places where we might have incidents that affect the transportation system, and where would we detour people to go? And now we're looking at all of those roughly 50 routes, and are there things that we can do to help the operations of those areas when they're functioning as a detour route or just every day? This is important for moving, large trucks. They're often caught in the same kinds of detours that we all are, and how best to move those through our region. High capacity transportation. Basically, there is a lot of interest in our area for commuter rail and/or light rail. And we received some funding from the state legislature to look at what are options for Thurston County to link us up to Pierce and King County. And we've got a community forum coming up on October 24th, really to go over these results in detail and talk about what are our next steps in our region. Because the short story for this work is we do not yet have the density to support commuter rail and light rail in our area. But what do we as a region want to be working towards in the future? Because even though that's our case now, we got to be looking out ahead and planning for what do we ultimately want to be working towards. And so that'll be a big piece of work because, well, I'll talk about I-5 a little bit in a moment. Rural transit. This is a service that a lot of folks don't know TRPC provides. And this is something that's incredibly important to link up the north part of our county with the south part of our county. And Port of Olympia services the whole county. This is how someone could get to the Tenino Ag Park, for example, via transit. And this is a service that TRPC has been providing for over 20 years, and it's grant funded, which is a little risky. So because we compete for these funds to keep this service going every 2 or 4 years. So and as Tenino, Rainier, Rochester, Bucota grow, this service is becoming increasingly more important as a true lifeline service to link up some of our South County communities up to the North County and also to Centralia. Very important service. This is the big one that, as a heads up, there's a lot of opportunity right now with federal funding with the bipartisan infrastructure law. And we've been pretty aggressive in going after that funding for planning needs that we have identified as a region, but haven't had the resources to do. And freight mobility was a big one of those. And we have received now the federal funding to do it. We're not going to really be starting that work until 2025, but obviously the Port of Olympia will be a big player in this. We'll be looking at ground transportation, but it'll also be considering air and water as well, and looking at our whole system and how are we moving freight to and from our region, and what sorts of things can we be working towards in the future to make that more efficient, more effective. I will talk a little bit about I-5 because everywhere I go, this comes up. This has been one of our highest priorities for over 7 years now. What you're looking at on this slide, that's actually the DuPont area and Joint Base Lewis McChord, and that is I-5 running through the middle, what looks like a red and green line. That red line, those are actually individual dots. They're cars. This is our transportation model that we're looking at. And this is what we expect southbound I-5 to look like on a typical afternoon in 2045 after the HOV lane in both directions through Joint Base Lewis McChord, which they're working on now and is scheduled to be complete by the end of 2025. Once that is complete, what that does is effectively move the bottleneck down to Mounts Road, because that's where then I-5 will go from 4 lanes back down to 3. Obviously, that's a big impact on people trying to access our region. What our model shows is about a 7-mile backup. This is during the afternoon peak period in southbound I-5 at Mounts Road. Similarly, our model shows through Olympia and Lacey, we're going to see the same thing. What you're looking at here, this is I-5 through Olympia. That little spur off to the left is US 101. And so the same thing, we're looking at about a 5 to 7 mile backup through Thurston County, because US 101 is another big pinch point for I-5. So these are things that we've been working on. How can we improve this situation? Well, at the same time, Nisqually Indian Tribe has done a great deal of work to help bring to our attention the impacts of I-5 through the Nisqually Delta. And that's what you're looking at here, a time series of 4 photos. That's the Nisqually River and the line going straight across above diagonal, just above the red circle. That's I-5. And what I-5 is essentially acting as a dam across the Nisqually River because the bridge span is not wide enough. That is having a very large impact on salmon habitat and the productivity of the lower part of the Nisqually River. It also has created a huge flood risk. And that's what part of what you're seeing here is the channel of the Nisqually is cutting towards I-5. And the reason for that is because the bridge span is too narrow, when flows are high and there's a lot of energy in the stream, that energy wants to go somewhere. And when when the bridge is too narrow, when we've got a lot of water, it backs that water up. When it starts backing that water up, that's when the river looks for a new way to get to move. And that's what it's doing over to the right, is it's cutting a new channel. And this really happened with flooding in 96 and 97 and has continued. The modeling shows that by 2050, the Nisqually will be cutting its channel through I-5 if we do not do something to address this situation. So this has a huge impact for salmon habitat, treaty rights, transportation, mobility, flood risk. This is a big issue that the legislature has been helping us work on now for a number of years. And the fix for this will be very expensive because what we need to do is widen that bridge span considerably. And so right now, DOT is looking at 3 alternatives for the bridge. They're right in just about to start, they have started National Environmental Policy Act review, NEPA. They're early on in the process, but they'll be looking at 3 bridge spans, 3,000, 6,000, 12,000. at an estimate of somewhere between maybe between $1 billion and $4 billion to construct this. So this is a big project. It also would include HOV lanes. So that would help with that high capacity transportation because it would give express buses some competitive advantage if they had an HOV lane to use. And then there's a ton of other things that we have going on. Like I said, we've been really aggressive in going after federal funds. Some of these certainly will have some ties to the port as well, but I really wanted to highlight the most likely to have some interaction. And like I said, Director Smith and I are talking about ways that we can help support and also just make sure that as we're going through this work, that the port is well represented. Port's been a member of TRPC for many, many years, and we want to just keep that relationship and keep strengthening it. So lots going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Questions? Comments?
Oh, I can go, sure. My favorite TRPC tool is the heat map where you can look at population densities. It is so cool. And one of the things I serve on TRPC as a representative of the port, and it's just been so fun learning that pretty much everything either can or does go through TRPC. And I'm so excited that we are building our relationship because I think there's just more opportunities, the more we know and the more connectivity we have.
Definitely.
And I use Mark as an example of an outstanding leader over and over and over because TRPC runs so well and the way that questions are presented and information is presented. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Masavada, anything? Yeah, okay, all right. Commissioner Sanders?
Thank you. I appreciate the information. It's very.
We'll keep you posted.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
As usual, Mark, excellent job. Thank you for being.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so now we're going to move to the Deschutes Estuary Restoration Project Interlocal Agreement. The Department of Enterprise Services and John Wolf, Environmental Manager. Go right ahead. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm John Wolf, the Environmental Manager for the Port. I'm here to introduce Ann Larson with the Department of Natural Resources. She's overseeing the Deschutes Estuary Restoration Project. For the last roughly 8 months, the Port has been working with her and her team to draft an interlocal agreement for the management of sediment that is expected to make its way into Bud Inlet with the removal of the Fifth Avenue Dam. She's going to come up and talk about that. This is just informational tonight. In 2 weeks, the staff intend to come back seeking approval for the executive director to sign that interlocal agreement. So please come up.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Looks like I have control here too. Fun. Okay, so Ann Larson, I'm the project director. I work for the state of Washington, and I've been working on this project for the last 7 years. When we were first here earlier this year, there was a lot of new faces, and we were just getting started, and I'll have to say we've come a long way. So today we're going to give you a little bit of an overview of the project, talk about the project itself and its benefits, and then the real meat of the conversation today is to talk about the interlocal agreement and then the schedule for signing. So I'm going to start off and just give you a little bit of context. There are some slides that we use for a lot of our public meetings that we've been having, and they're really meant to inspire. So I hope you enjoy these. I think some of you have already seen these before. I do want to say, just as opening, this project is so unique. We are demonstrating that the urban and the natural can coexist together. And we're seeing this as being one of the largest estuary restorations in an urban setting in the nation. And that's a big deal. We've been working closely with the port over the period of this time with all the other jurisdictions, and that partnership has really led us to the decisions that we're making here today. And I very much appreciate those partnerships. With me, I have some amazing team members. They'll introduce themselves when they come up to speak, but just briefly, we have Tessa Gardner, who is from Floyd Snyder, with her Aaron, who's from Floyd Snyder, Sarah from Eco Northwest. I should be pointing at you, and then Dave from the AG's office. So All right. And I just want to say that this is a team effort, so feel free to ask us questions. They'll be coming up and down as we have our presentation. So just lastly, I just want to say this is a legacy project. It is really going to change the face of the city of Olympia and the port. And so we're super excited. All right. Okay. So let's see. Okay, just as a little history. So historically, fresh water from the Deschutes would mix with salt water in Budla Inlet, and it would be over expansive tidal flats. This area is really rich with history and is the southern terminus of the Puget Sound. The Deschutes watershed is approximately 270 square miles. The lower 260 acres were significantly disrupted in the 1950s when the state built a dam at the mouth of the Deschutes River. Since that time, there have been chronic water violations, and then sediment has accumulated up to 13 feet in certain areas. As you all know, we also have quite a few invasive species, at least a dozen of them, and the New Zealand mud snails is what caused the water body to be closed today. The Deschutes Estuary also has a long-standing it's culturally insignificant to the tribe, particularly the Squaxin Island tribe, and they've been a partner with us for several years now. The Squaxin Island tribe is considered as the people in the land of Deschutes Estate-Chas, and they just had a festival a couple weeks ago. They've been involved in the planning, and they are a key partner with us today. Other tidbits of history. This area was historically been with Chinese Americans. Chinese immigration started in the early 1900s, and Chinatown was established along the waterfront of the estuary, and it was a community built in a series of houseboats. This area was referred to as Little Hollywood, and it was ultimately removed as part of the long process to construct Capitol Lake. And as you all know, this project area has a rich maritime history. The old Olympia Brewing Company was operated by Tumwater Historical Park, and vessels would make their way up 2 miles to the base of Tumwater Falls. We also know that the Olympia Yacht Club has a pretty successful presence there now. And in modern times, Capitol Lake has been embraced by the community. As you all know, we have quite a few events there. It is in the heart of downtown Olympia, and it's a place for community and engagement. And as you also well know, it's in our capital city, and it has had a significant influence over at the Capitol over time. In 1983, there was the initial visioning for the design and construction of the Capitol building. And in 1911, Wilder and White submitted a plan that would perch the Capitol building on the hillside that orient all of the buildings to the views of the water and the mountains. Heritage Park was designed as an extension of the Capitol campus, and there are features across the park that extend to represent the history from across the state and transition to the water body. And in 2022, DES identified estuary restoration as a management alternative that had the greatest range of benefits, and you all were part of those conversation. It was most supported by the stakeholders. And so we began together in this process to re-envision the landscape. And when we do that, we must think about all the rich history of this place, the natural history, the tribal history, the settlement community, the maritime community, the civic community, and the Capitol campus. And our goal is to represent all of those interests in a way that balances our shared interests. And then when we do that, we see that water is the unifying force. It is all of the history of our time has brought us to the water. From harvesting from the water, recreating on the water, crossing the water to either side. The water brings us together, and it's very much the heart of Olympia. I'm going to turn it over to Tessa, and she's going to give you some more information.
All right. I'm just going to go through a couple quick slides here about the program components and the benefits of Deschutes Estuary Restoration. And we think that this is so important because the interlocal agreement cannot be held as a separate project or effort. They're interrelated. It's a piece, but a very important piece of this effort to restore the Great Deschutes Estuary. So Deschutes Estuary Restoration includes a significant dredging event, about 500,000 cubic yards to reestablish the main channel of the Deschutes River. That sediment would be placed on the shoreline to create habitat, which is so important for fish and other species. And that dredge event and placement also is very important to the port because that dredging during construction reduces the downstream mobilization of sediment by approximately 50% in some areas in West Bay. It also reduces our project costs. There are transportation benefits as described by Mark. Thank you for covering that for us. And that will be produced by the construction of the new Fifth Avenue Bridge, but also boardwalks, and there are other recreational features. And the project also consists of significant other utility and infrastructure components. So utility improvements, retrofits of existing stormwater outfalls, and a new Percival Cove Bridge. After construction, and after the dam is removed, this is very important, there will be maintenance dredging in West Bay, and that's the component that is focused on in the interlocal agreement. But the interlocal agreement is needed to release and to unlock all of the benefits of the project components that I just described. So we delivered a conceptual design to the state in mid-2024, and I'm going to go through a couple of visual renderings of that. These are based on the actual engineering plans that we've just completed. So this is existing conditions in Capitol Lake right now. Under the estuary, this is conditions that would occur most of the time under most sea levels. So you can see the constructed habitat on the shoreline and the new Fifth Avenue Bridge in the background there. This is conditions under low tide elevations. Moving to the middle basin near I-5, this is existing conditions, and then conditions in the future under mean sea level, and conditions under low water levels. And the new Fifth Avenue Bridge that would provide connectivity after the Fifth Avenue Dam is removed is shown here. You can see the conceptual rendering that includes expansive pedestrian programming to the south to provide community space and views back onto the estuary and to the Capitol Dome. This has been so well received by the community. I'll go through just a couple of the renderings here for you. And this is the center of the bridge. We refer to this open space as the oculus. The intention of this oculus is to really be a gathering point, and it's centered over mid-channel so that when the salmon return in the late summer and early fall, that there can be viewing down onto the salmon to really connect people from the built environment to the natural environment. Okay, so we're going through this at a quick pace, but we want to now move into content for the interlocal agreement. But that really starts with the importance of the interlocal agreement to unlocking the project benefits. I'm going to run through this set of project benefits pretty quickly here. But what I want to do in as I tee that up is draw your attention to that blue outline that we're showing on the screen. This is a restoration project that extends across 2 miles of habitat and is so interrelated with the Port of Olympia, which brings us to the continued collaboration that we've had since the beginning of the EIS process and the City of Olympia. I'll talk through those benefits and the relationship there here. So restoration of the estuary would restore that 2 miles of estuarine habitat that's so critical to the growth of ESA listed salmon and other important species like the southern resident killer whale that rely on salmon, or forage fish that the salmon rely on. We know that you all are doing work to that effect to improve habitat for those species as well through your contaminated remediation and through other habitat restoration efforts. Dam removal will remove flood elevations across downtown Olympia by approximately 1 foot, and it's a critical component to the sea level rise resiliency plan. It is also part of the network of needed adaptation measures that you all are working on as well. Once we all armor the shoreline, we can see that improved resiliency across downtown. So again, part of that collaboration. Dam removal will address chronic water quality violations in Butt Inlet by reducing the pulsing of nutrients into the system in late fall that depletes oxygen that's so important for fish and other salmon species. Again, the water that the port is related to. The project will reintroduce active recreation to this expansive water body that has been closed since 2009 because of the presence of the New Zealand mud snail. It also makes meaningful strides towards the restorative justice for Squaxin Island tribe. We know that the Port of Olympia has a relationship with the Squaxin Island tribe because of this area being of such importance to them, as Anne described. This project would also allow them to use the water body as well. Partnership with the City of Olympia, the Port of Olympia, and LOT is integral to this project and the benefits that could be received. One thing I haven't yet mentioned is the opportunity for sediment that moves downstream after the project to potentially lower costs of remediation for the Port of Olympia by covering areas of low contamination and allowing that to be natural recovery rather than physical dredging. Okay. So let's talk about why we are have made progress toward a shared funding and governance model. In 2015, 2018, and 2023, when the DES received an appropriation for this project, each one included a mandate from the legislature to convene local jurisdictions to look at a shared funding and governance model. And they have included that in every proviso moving forward. So the funding and governance work group was convened in 2016 in response to that. And the membership is shown on the right side of the screen in that table. I'll let Sarah cover the key components.
I'm Sarah Rich. I'm a project director with Echo Northwest, and I've been involved in as part of the facilitation of the funding and governance work group since 2018. And so when that process initiated in coordination with the EIS process with the funding and governance work group involving the members that were shown on the previous slide, it was started, guided with these principles that you see here. This really supported the process, and it's where we began, where the group began. And I want to point out just a couple of these that really shaped where we landed today, 6 years later. This has been a deliberative process over 6 years involving a lot of different pieces that have come up in the process of the EIS and then after. So several of the key things here that the group began with were that those who contributed to the problem should participate in funding or paying for the solution, and those who benefit from the solution should participate in funding or paying for solution. That provided some nexus for why each individual jurisdiction was involved. And as we think about what funding and governance would look like, dedicated and secure funding source was important. Manageable governance was important, and both of those were key to how the agreement looks today. I would say the last one I'm going to point out is a commitment to a long-term collaborative process, and that's really one of the key benefits of having an interlocal agreement that looks forward. Is it demonstrates commitment from the local jurisdictions in answer to what the legislature put before as the challenge. To demonstrate what long-term collaboration could look like in supporting this project over time. So where we landed, there are two key parts to the interlocal agreement. One involves the ownership of assets and roles and responsibilities in governance. And you'll see here, for example, that on the asset side of things, the City of Olympia, the interlocal agreement outlines the provision that the City of Olympia would take on ownership and maintenance of the new Fifth Avenue Bridge. Thurston County would take on a role or a responsibility as treasurer for the local funds that would come through. For the Port of Olympia and the state of Washington, there are responsibilities that come towards the long-term sediment management. Once we take out the assets that the project would create, the real long-term thing that needs to be governed is the management of sediment. And I'll get to the driving force of that on the next slide. But the Port of Olympia has responsibility for managing sediment in your vessel berths and would retain that responsibility in cooperation with the organization that the ILA creates for managing sediment in the larger area downstream of the dam. The tribe also has, is party to the agreement and has taken on responsibility and potential participation in habitat enhancement over time. And I think that's all I'll say here. So this slide is really focused on the sediment management pieces, what would happen after the dam comes out. And so we know, you see on the left there, under current conditions or no action, the red indicates sediment deposition through the system as it flows down through the Deschutes River. And when you compare the no action on the left to the estuary on the right, when you take the dam out, there's more sediment that comes down through, and you see the darker red areas. It really hugs to the east side of the shore there and concentrates in the area downstream of the dam. So darker red indicates more sediment deposition. And so we know that there is a need to manage that sediment once the dam comes out. And the settlement modeling indicates a reoccurrence interval for that in different areas. So that's what the figure on the right shows. And you can see the kind of hatched line up in the sort of mauve colored area is the port vessel berths. And then the other areas that are called out in the agreement specifically are the Olympia Yacht Club in green, which is closest to the dam. That would be removed there, and then some of the other marina areas and access areas in blue and gold orange there. And then you can see the federal turning basin and the navigation channel there. So the agreement outlines a process where that all area would be monitored and it would be managed and determined when dredging would be required, and then a process for actually implementing that dredging. The Olympia Yacht Club area, likely based on modeling results, would be dredged every 6 years, and then the other areas, including the port vessel berths, would be on a 12-year recurrence interval. So when it comes to the actual costs that this agreement outlines the secure funding for. We have an approach that documents the cost of this dredging program through 2050, and that's an important provision of the agreement, that the agreement lasts through 2050, which is consistent with the lease end date for the different marinas, and gives the local community and signatories to the agreement opportunity to revisit how the agreement has been working. So it's only through 2050. And what you see here are the different costs. This is for the project as a whole up at the top. So design and permitting at 26 million, construction at 350 million approximately. Those are both taken up by the state. The state was responsible for putting the dam in. The state will be responsible for, according to the guiding principles, paying for that piece of it. And then we have two pieces that are part of the interlocal agreement looking beyond construction when construction completes. And we have baseline sediment management and increased sediment management. Both are relevant for the port here because within the port vessel berths, there is a cost that you would be incurring whether the dam comes out or not. And that's captured under the baseline. It's the same logic applies to the other areas that the marinas have responsibility for. And then we have the increased sediment management. So this is the subject of shared funding across all of the jurisdictions, and a big focus of what the memorandum of understanding and interlocal agreement have been focused on. So we have in 2022 dollars, 18.6 million to distribute across all of the signatories to the interlocal agreement, with the exception of the Squaxin Island tribe. And there's equal allocation across all of those entities, including the state, with the exception that the city of Olympia has 50% more responsibility because it is because of its adjacency to the area and the benefits that it receives. So again, coming back to that guiding principle of those who benefit share in the costs, and there's some proportionality there. So what this translates to then, as far as the funding commitment, which is the second piece, you have the responsibility commitment on governance, and then you have the funding commitment. We have in the orange box there, the Port of Olympia responsibility, and that shows that it has the let's see here, takes the 2022 EIS cost, which you see over here, and then it's the share that the Port of Olympia was allocated, and these costs are escalated at a 4.5% rate into the future through the 25th end of the term of the agreement in 2050, and that leads to the combined payment there at the end over the period of 50 years, which for the port includes both the baseline component of the responsibility for sediment management as well as the shared component. And we can pause there for questions, or we can wrap it up.
I have a question.
Yes. Go ahead.
So you said that the yacht club and the marina, maybe just the yacht club, I'm not sure about the other marinas, have to dredge every 6 years and the port's doing every 12.
Just the yacht club would be
Just the yacht club.
in the 6, the green, I'll pull that slide back up. Yep.
And so the private marinas on that last slide are listed as a TBD as far as the cost of dredging. So there's 0% allocated to paying. Is that for the rest of the dredging? Is there a contemplation of the cost impact on the yacht club and the private marinas?
So as a separate process, we've been coordinating with the private marinas, and they understand that under this interlocal agreement, it has assigned the baseline costs to the marina areas, the yacht club. So the costs associated with the yacht club every 6 years and every 12 years for the other areas. And that would be the baseline costs that they would be responsible for, assuming the dam didn't come out under the current terms of their leases with DNR. And so those conversations will be ongoing about how they will meet that obligation that is outlined under the ILA. But it is part of the ILA agreement that the cost, the contribution would have to be, in order to initiate a dredge, to be there from the local entities, from the state, and from the marinas to initiate dredge activity.
Okay.
Would the rest of the team say anything else there on that?
Can I restate a little bit, just because I had the pleasure just this last year of sitting with Commissioner Sanders as an alternate on the funding and governance work, and the team did a good job of making sure we were coming in late, but that we were kept up to speed. In fact, even our staff, Jonathan, Sean, all of us are very new to the conversation that's going to make a difference for a long time. I think when you were answering Commissioner Harding's question, if I could unpack it, first of all, already private marinas, just like the port, have some dredging that they have to do in order to maintain their berths.
Yes.
And so that's when you talk about baseline conditions, it's what do they currently already kind of build in or anticipate the dredging that they have to do. And then there's the incremental increase of sediment, which will be deposited down there.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you're saying is that you haven't had those conversations on behalf of the whole shared governance group. You've started them, but we haven't nailed down how they will participate in increasing, in dealing with the incremental increase.
No, so I'm sorry. The responsibility for the incremental amount is the subject of the interlocal agreement. So those are
the governmental and
exactly
the hope that it's not borne by the private sector.
The incremental. So the private sector is responsible for the amount of sediment dredging that would occur in the future, and if the dam didn't come out under the lease terms that they have with DES or with DNR going forward.
And I just cursory, I didn't do my full deep dive of the document itself. Where should I look in the document so that I can?
before we becomes the assistant.
Just understanding the nexus between the impact on the private marinas and how if in fact the yacht club has to dredge twice as often as everybody else, essentially, how that's being managed, how that's being, decision making, paying for it. I understand what you're saying. I just want to make sense. Where would I can ask you offline too, if that's, I'm not trying to put you on the spot at all. Yeah, okay, I'll ask offline.
Yeah.
So, and then why is that number TBD when everything else is projected?
So the payment schedule is TBD. The total amount is not, is listed there on the bottom line. So when you look at the total cost over the term of the ILA, the baseline amount that's allocated or assigned to the private sector, the marinas and the yacht club, is what is listed there. The question really is
The 15 million? Okay.
Yeah, the question really is, we haven't had those conversations with them about, there's no payment schedule suggested for that. That process will is designed to happen after this. So the commitment is there through the ILA process that the locals are providing your portion contingent on the marinas providing the amount under baseline.
Okay. I might just follow up with you after. And you said 2050 is the end of all the DNR leases for the private marinas.
Approximately.
Okay, and I keep running into I'm not in government, so I don't understand what happens at the end of this. And so there is this increased cost that goes beyond the contemplation, the timeline. And I recognize we can't bind future legislatures, et cetera, but practically speaking, the port having the most need for dredging. And then we will also have to be answering to our community as far as those private marinas are concerned, if that's not happening regularly enough. So what would you recommend as far as us considering beyond this timeline? Are there things that have worked in other projects where you create another agreement, or what's a reasonable expectation as far as sharing the costs beyond the timeline?
I'll start real quick, and then Dave, if you have other thoughts, but I think that the provision that is in the ILA right now that is may give you an indication of what that looks like is that there is a provision that requires the group to come together some period before the expiration to talk about what comes next. Part of that is, I would assume, would be learning about what has happened and how has it been working. But the intent is to make sure that the group comes together to talk intentionally and deliberately before it expires about what comes next. Dave, you want to take the rest of that?
I think you covered that pretty well in that the 2050 was not just pulled out as a nice round number. It is when those leases are expiring, and it is also a good amount of time to where everybody has an off-ramp, enough time to look and see what's going on in that future. But then we are going to sit down and talk about, hey, the ILA is ending. It is in fact ending. Do we want to extend it? Who wants to play in that game? Does it still make sense for your jurisdiction, your entity to continue on? Marinas, does this all no longer make sense for you? How's it working for you? So basically there's this, as again, an off-ramp of a time period while we're figuring out how much sediment is actually coming out, how much is it costing, what does it look like going forward? So force the conversation, but again, we're not going to be able to dictate what that conversation looks like in that period. Does that help?
Yeah, I think it's the removing the dam and restoring the estuary being the goal of the state, but maintaining the navigation channel and the marinas being a community concern that the state may or may not have an interest in maintaining in 2050 and participating in. So all of these different funding entities may or may not participate in future dredging. So we just have to plan that. What if we were holding the whole bag for all of this dredging, and what would that look like, so that we have a plan?
The whole bag being the whole port bag.
The whole, I think the marinas could, from a community perspective, become on the table of the port If, I think that's something that we will just need to consider. Like we have, that maintaining the federal navigation channel is one obligation, and then maintaining and whether or not DNR, I mean, I get that those leases are up with DNR in 2050, which maybe it becomes a moot point, but if we commit to dredging, it probably isn't a moot point. That probably continues to be something DNR continues with if there's dredged marinas available.
Right, and I think that makes total sense. There's kind of two parts to it, the actual digging and then the funding.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
We have one slide left.
Okay.
I gotta wrap us up here. Okay. We met with you guys really early in the year, and there are a lot of dates from then until now. And as I think you've heard, intentional and deliberate, those are the things that we have tried to do throughout this process. And you'll see that we would have group meetings with the whole broad funding and governance work group, and then we would peel off and we would have individual meetings. And so, and we would also include your technical staff. So having the opportunity for everybody to have a group discussion and then taking it back, having those individual discussions to talk about specific issues related to the port or to the city. And as you can see, we've been able to get through this very, very complex, long process, we think on time, because we've been so deliberate that we've heard from everybody. We've included all the comments that we've heard over, and we're at this point where at the end of it, I think that we've heard from everybody and we feel really good about the product that you have in front of us. We're having these meetings. You're the first one. We actually are hoping to have Squaxin Island on the 11th actually, but you're our first one that we're presenting to for this broader public. And then we've got Lot, City of Tumwater, then our directors to sign it, then Thurston and the City of Olympia. But yeah, we're to the end of the year, and then we get into legislative session, hopefully with this interlocal agreement in hand with our budget ask. And yeah, it's just been great to work with everybody and really have this deliberate process where we've included everyone at all stages of this to make sure that we're having every voice be heard. So I think that's the last thing. No one else clicks anymore, so it must be. Do you guys have any questions?
Any other questions, comments?
To me or any of my wonderful team? No.
All right, sounds like we're good.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Presentation. Let's take a moment for public comment on this topic. Is there any public comment in here, or are there any hands on the Zoom? Oh, we have one.
I'm Anita Thompson. I'm new to Olympia, and I'm really looking forward to the Deschutes flowing freely again under Fifth Avenue and all through. I wish we could take out the dam up at Tumwater Falls, to tell the truth. And I know I studied Lake Merritt in Oakland, California, and it has the same issues, and they're slowly improving. And I'm really glad to see all the thought that's going into this. And I appreciated all the visuals that were available at the Squaxin Festival a couple of weeks ago. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there any attending remotely who'd like to make public comment on the Deschutes Estuary Restoration Project interlocal agreement? Any hands, Missy?
Wolfsburg has a hand raised.
Wolfsburg? Can't hear you if you're speaking.
Okay.
There you are. Now we can hear you.
Yeah, there are a couple of buttons you have to click that I didn't see the first time. So sorry, Carla Wolfsburg. I just really appreciated this very in-depth look at the future of what's going to be happening in the Deschutes Estuary. And I particularly was interested in the comments that Tessa made about the restoration of the salmon and the fish for the salmon, and also about the sediment that's moving downstream and how it might serve as a natural recovery to some of the pollution instead of dredging. And I would hope the commissioners would really look seriously at this option. I hope you are looking at that option in the current cleanup project, because that is one really important natural way of cleaning up. So instead of dredging. So thank you. And I really appreciated this report.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Wolfsburg. Any other public comment on the Deschutes Estuary restoration? All right, sounds like we're good. Thank you guys very much. Very, very good presentation. Let's move on then to the briefing of the Bud Inlet Remediation Project. John Wolf, Environmental Manager. You have the floor, sir.
Good evening again, Commissioners. I'm John Wolf, Environmental Manager for the Port. And as this is my first official opportunity to speak to you in a meeting, I'd just like to share that I came to the Port in October of last year. And previous to that, for 18 years, I was the Deputy Director of Natural Resources for the Skokomish Indian Tribe, where I helped oversee the restoration work on the river. Previous to that, I was with the Department of Fish and Wildlife in the Hatcheries program. And since 1989, I've lived in Olympia, so I am thrilled to be able to bring my experience to the Port for this important work. Very briefly, we're going to be talking about the history of the project progress, and the next steps. So we have an agreed order with the Department of Ecology. This is a legally binding agreement to follow the state's MOTCA cleanup process, the Model Toxics Control Act. We are at roughly the third stage, which is what I'll call the science stage. The scientists will use the science gained in this stage to then inform and help with the design and engineering of a cleanup plan at a later stage. We're well aware of ongoing pollution issues, yard waste, stormwater, fecal coliform, but this project is focusing on the legacy contamination from industry that used to be on the peninsula. Those include dioxins, furans, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, diesel, petroleum, heavy metals like mercury, cadmium, lead, and then pentachlorophenol, which is a chemical used to treat wood like pilings. Sediment sampling so far, we've done about 100 locations in East Bay, which is also known as Sub-Area 1. That's actually comes out to about 1,200 samples, because in addition to surface samples, we also used a VibraCore sampler, which went between 10 and 20 feet into the sediment, and then each 1 foot increment becomes a sample. Nearly all the results have been returned, but they're still being validated by the lab. They're very positive, and that work continues. And we plan to present results to the Commission later in 2024 or early 2025. Okay, so far, the draft alternatives memo is under ecology review. We are working on the uplands investigation for sediment placement. Sediment sampling is complete in East Bay, and we anticipate sediment sampling in West Bay this winter. We submitted the West Bay Data Gaps memo to Department of Ecology for review, and this is, as the title implies, the document that informs us which data are missing and that we need to collect while out in the field. We're preparing the draft investigation work plan for Sub-Area 2, which will then direct the work we actually do. We're drafting the Sub-Area 1 pre-remedial design investigation report. This is the sampling results for Sub-Area 1, East Bay. I'm excited to announce that we expended the first remedial action grant after 9 years. The Department of Ecology was eager to see that happen. That was a $4 million grant, $2 million from Ecology, $2 million port match. We are preparing the second remedial action grant. That's a $12 million grant, $6 million from Ecology with a $6 million port match. And also excited to say that we've received about $600,000 in reimbursement from the Department of Commerce from that direct appropriation from the legislature. So again, very brief, but I would encourage everybody to go look at the portofolympia.com Bud Inlet page. Karen, our communication specialist, just updated that page. It's beautiful, so please go take a look. And at any time, please contact me directly, jonathanw@portolympia.com, or if it's easier, budinlet@portolympia.com. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Any questions?
Any questions or comments? Commissioner Sanders, anything?
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dodd?
One little question.
Yes, please.
It sounds like we're about to start the West Bay sampling. And we did hear from DES about the possibility of natural covering in some areas instead of needing to dredge. At what stage would that be considered? It would be after you characterize the sediment?
Correct. That's a couple years down the road. Yes, that will be part of the engineering and design for an actual plan for cleanup. We'll take that into account at that point. At this point, it's just collecting the science, the sediment.
And one thing I'm noticing is some of the people who are most concerned about our work are worried about missing the moment when okay, so how will they know when it's the moment for that to be considered? Could you give me a name for what that's called? Say it again, 2 years from now, during what stage?
With the design and engineering stage for the cleanup plan.
Okay,
So the sediment samples and the science we're collecting now will inform that in a couple of years. And we'll do it in stages. We'll do most likely at this point, East Bay, then West Bay, then areas to the north. So that'll be staged cleanup.
thank you.
Yes, you're very welcome.
And just piggybacking on that, is there a distinction between natural sediment cap and a man-made sediment cap from a science perspective, or would both of those have the same function?
I believe they'd have the same function, it's just a matter of where it comes from.
I loved your little kelp and your graphics on your presentation.
Thank you. When we practiced, it came up perfectly, and now tonight it was a little off.
I love
I apologize.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on. We have nothing under the action calendar.
A new member of the public, point of, Anita has a question, but this is not usually how it's set up. Jonathan's right next to you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So where were we? Okay. We have nothing under the action calendar. So we'll move on to action other calendar. And the first up there is the 2025 budget schedule. Tad Koff, Director of Finance. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ted Koff, Director of Finance, Port of Olympia. I will try and make my presentations succinct. Tonight's presentation is a budget schedule review of the 2025 events that are going to take place specifically with the commission to arrive at the final budget. Maybe. The right button, right? There we go. So 20, we'll look at the 2025 budget schedule and the 2025 capital investment plan schedule, which is just the next event. This is an action other. So the action requested is I always want to say it's adopting the budget schedule, but I believe it's just approving the budget schedule is technically what we are doing. So looking at the schedule, the timeline has several meetings starting in September with the budget schedule, which is this. We will go on to the draft capital investment plan. Then following on September 23rd, the non-operating tax levy use and community events will be reviewed. On the 14th of October, the non-operating budget and tax levy will be reviewed. October 21st, the 2025 budget and capital investment plan draft operating budget first review will be done. Then we'll move on October 28th to the budget, the 2025 budget and capital investment plan draft operating budget second review. So after we've got a chance to get input and go back and forth, that's where it's fine tuned. November 12th will be the capital investment plan and introducing the budget resolutions. I think there are 3 that are involved: 2025 budget, the 2025 tax levy budget, and the presentation, public hearing. We've got one, scheduled, adjustment meeting if necessary on November 18th. And then on November 25th, we end up with the budget, the 2025 budget and 2025 tax levy resolution adoption. And that brings us through the full schedule. Are there any questions before I move on to, well, the next work session is the capital investment plan. So that's all there is on this slide. Are there any questions? Yes.
Could you just, since this isn't going to be new for 3 of the commissioners, could you just cover how you plan to take questions and commissioner feedback? And I thought you did a great job of that last year as far as the IOUs. So maybe just reminding everyone how their voice can be heard as far as that plan.
Sure. So as we roll through the process and we build the slides, I'll be presenting, but it's trying to be very much a give and take. So as we look through things, there'll be questions and then there'll be items that either I can answer or we'll try and have the subject matter experts with me, various department heads and whatnot, depending on what is being presented at that specific meeting. And then if we don't have an answer, and even if we do, we're going to propagate an IOU list so we can kind of keep a running track of what did we decide there? How did that get discussed? And that'll be earlier on in the slide decks. And we just keep that running so that everybody can kind of keep a placeholder of what's been discussed and thoughts that have been expressed. Yes.
Done such a good job consulting us about like what we want to see. I just wanted to make sure we're lined up on this, that you're working to present the numbers in a way that kind of our lines of business are a little bit more ring fenced. So we're understanding the separate budgets for each line of business operation.
You will see, you will see the actual individual basically income. And when you see me go through Q2 here in a moment, I'm trying to focus more in on those operational units. I believe that was the expressed interest of the commission over the last year and unlikely before my time as well, to get a better bead on how are they doing, how are they being planned, and then to allow for better direction in the future.
Thank you.
The budget won't necessarily cover some of the things we've discussed about reserve funds specifically for the airport that are reserved for the airport, and that won't be contemplated in this process.
Correct. I mean, you've got to.
More account.
Right.
Yeah. So the idea is to not try and be everything all at the same time. Otherwise, we won't make headway. So a financial analysis report would be more analysis. What you'll be seeing coming up here will be like more of a budget versus actual. So you can see how we've performed at this point in time. I don't work in a microcosm. I know that there's still some other angles to the issues that want to be brought up. But we do try to keep on point to the type of thing that we're presenting and working on.
I think for me, sometimes separating budget and finance is something I have to remind myself that it's 2 separate conversations.
True.
Yeah.
So as far as this goes, I would request at this point that the schedule be approved. And I would say the only other thing is, are there any other questions? But we're kind of going through the questions. So that would be my request at this time.
Looking to approve the budget schedule as presented. Okay.
All right, we have a motion to approve the budget schedule as it's been presented, and we have a second. Is there any further commission discussion? If not, let's see if there's any public comment on the budget schedule.
No hands raised.
Not hearing any public comment, I'll move to the vote. We have a motion and a second to approve the 2025 budget schedule as presented this evening. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Tad.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, moving on to the advisory calendar. We've already been through number 1, and look at that, we're moving right into number 2, and Tad didn't even have to sit down. So Q2 for Q2 for 2024 budget update, Tad Koff, you have the floor again.
Okay, Tad Koff, Director of Finance for the Port of Olympia. Presenting on the budget update. This is really a Q2 24 budget variance update, variance analysis of up to the midpoint in the year. So that's what you're going to see. It's a little truncated title there. I'm not getting the advanced slide working. Nope. That'll work too. So in an effort to ongoing present an improved product to the commissioners and the public of understanding and telling the story that is the port and its finances, this is again another fine tuning of my Q1 presentation, which I believe was a little too granular. So this is a step back and a bit of a higher view. So we're going to look at the summary income statement review, operating units and cost centers. So we'll look at each unit and those units of variance and analysis. We'll take a look at the balance sheet for the month end. And we will also do the first quarter financial highlights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each one. This is a summary slide of the port's financial review, which is comprehensive. So this is all the business units together and the parts that are on here. And this is the busiest slide, so it will get easier to read. But you're looking at a very condensed profit and loss statement where all figures are stated year to date. So this is January, February, March plus Q2. So all the way through 6 months. You're going to see that first column is the Q2 2023 actual. There's a request to be able to do some comparison to the prior years. So that is last year's point in time. That's the equivalent of the other columns. Q2 2024 actual is where we stand for the first 6 months. The Q2 2024 budget is where we planned to be. And the variance then we've added is just the difference between the actual and the budget. And then for ease of reading the percentages on the right, so you can just kind of quickly see, are we up or below what we're looking at? Keep in mind that when you're looking at revenues versus expenses, of one is being a negative and one is being a positive. So which way the sign is moving, we'll work through that. Couple things on here, because this is consolidated. It's always nice to keep in mind that non-operating income includes things like tenant revenue, interest income, and the ad valorem or property tax. Non-operating expenses, because these two areas always are hard to keep in people's minds, are non-operating benefits and salaries, government services, environmental costs are in the non-operating expenses, and bond interest expense and public amenities. Now, because there was a request from the public to see the allocation of those bond interest expenses, you'll see that on another slide, and it's a separate line item, but I'll explain it then. So for the year, halfway through the year, we are right now, revenues are coming in at 14% over, and the expenses are about 4% over. And you're going to see a trend here in the maintenance expenses. Because we're in the first 6 months of the year and we have some very cyclical business units, you're going to see maintenance expenses coming in under budget, significantly under budget, which is what you see there in the aggregate. And this is not true across the board, because there's a couple real gems in here as well, in that the overhead and the earnings before interest and depreciation and overhead of 229% is going to moderate. So keep in mind that this is a point in time report. We do not have seasonality in our budgeting, so we don't budget every month with a curve in it, so to speak. So you're going to see some of these numbers moderate in Q3 specifically, and I'll cover that as we keep going. So we get up with a non-operating income and loss. We're above 118% presently. Non-operating revenues are over by 20%. And then again, operating expenses are under. Even in that area, you're going to see those moderate as well as we go on. So while we are doing phenomenally well in total income on this report, do expect that to moderate in the next quarter. However, I do expect that the port is on a very positive trajectory overall. That is as wordy as I'll get on these slides. Yes.
Really appreciate the previous year comparison on the percentage, and I know it's a little bit busy, but for me, it just is such an easier snapshot, so thank you for adding.
You're welcome. This is probably easiest read than seen on a slide, and I appreciate that. So I've tried to make these as visually absorbable as possible. Are there any questions on the overall?
Just Tad, we're looking at this slide, comprehensive, bottom line up front. You give me the quote of that bottom line total income, the 623%. Tell me what this says that our total income is way above what was budgeted.
It is.
When you ignore the fact that more maintenance costs are going to come in later.
It is. And there is a story behind that. I'll you want me to do an early reveal? I can give it to you. Behind curtain one is the terminal. The terminal is knocking it out of the ballpark right now. There are international conditions with containers and freight, and I'm not going to explain that as well as some others that are not with us tonight could do. But I know that there are things that the port's able to take advantage of right now, and we are extremely busy on the terminal. The airport has done better, properties have done better, and the only actual operating unit that's at all negative right now is the marina, but the marina is extremely cyclical, and you'll see so much more activity in the warm months, which is Q3, than the cold months.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does that answer your question?
I just wanted it said.
Okay. Well, now I took all the steam out of my sail later. Okay. So we'll move on from the comprehensive and we will take a look at the income statements. This was, again, a work in process slide. This is a very more simplified view of side by side, the airport, the marina, the terminal, and the properties. And what I have on here is not a traditional income statement because it's not an operating unit per se. It is really a cost center of environmental. One of the things I had on this type of slide the last time I presented was commission, which got rather confusing in trying to explain what that is. And whenever that has come up, that immediately goes, how much are we paying our commissioners? And it's really a mislabeled category. So what we're going to work on and in the budget cycle is to put a better narrative of what these things are and what these costs mean. And that's going to be considered government services going forward. It's not on here. It's also another cost center, but we're going to kind of re-envision that. So it makes more sense when you look at it and other people look at it, they can understand it. So the business financial units here show the 4 units. It's not really conventional P&L in that I've added that line at the bottom that I mentioned. That was a public comment where the bond interest expense get allocated out so that we would realize what percentages are by those operating units. So when we looked at the bond debt before and the different bonds that have been issued by the port, I've gone through and taken a look at what those were used for and then what the remaining dollars are. And we do track that. We know it down to the penny, but it doesn't show on those individual income statements. So I've pulled it out so you can see where that money went. Something like properties that would have gone to buying property. That's why you see such a huge amount, because those were the dollars you used to make acquisitions. The marina's had a lot of work done over the years, so it's had a lot of bond debt, not as much at the airport. And then the terminal actually doesn't have a huge amount that's outstanding. So are there any questions on what this shows? Environmental is tracking on track. And this isn't really so much a comparative slide for variance. This is just kind of showing you a little snippet of how each unit is doing and how they're doing more or less next to each other. So as I said, the marina is the only one that presently is running negative. And that is, again, seasonality and the great upside of the other ones will mitigate a bit as we get through and they get their maintenance budgets and things in place and get through that because it'll increase expenses and the costs.
I don't mean to keep saying the same thing, but I think the way we're improving these, the way we're communicating this information is so much better. And thank you for not just keeping on doing the same thing.
Thank you. That is my goal. So as I get more feedback through the executive director and through your one-on-ones and then in these meetings, I will try and fine tune these presentations. If there's a more visual component to these, it might be advantageous or some other measurements that you'd like to see. We can always work those in as well.
And I think there's been feedback from the public for quite a long time that we are not being transparent in the way we communicate our finances. And I think these numbers go a long way to saying, yes, we want you to see the numbers. We want you to see it allocated by business line. So I think that, thank you for doing that. And I hope the public recognizes that effort.
Well, thank you. And you're welcome. I'm going to move on unless there are other questions on this particular presentation slide. Income statement, or so this is now we're drilling down in the individual operating units. So here is the airport. Now, for lack of other guidance and experience, I've come up with a threshold. So I'm going to leave this slide on and I'm going to read the next slide that shows all the variances that make up these numbers. And my criteria for that was the individual variances that make up these summarized line items on here on the income statement had to be a $10,000 amount or a minimum of a 10% variance. Both criteria had to be hit. So that's how I arrived at what was meaningful, that I thought would be actionable and possibly give insight. Now, I will say that in the supplemental material, there's also more detail that should you find that you want another answer to another line item that I don't hit on, feel free to send me a note or bring it up in a following meeting and I will get you that information. So going through here on the revenue side, starting out, I'm going to do two sheets here. As I said, the airport overall is doing significantly better than budgeted, with the actual income still in $64,000 as opposed to a budgeted negative $247,000, or an overall 126% improvement over budget. Again, this will level out, expected more so in Q3 as the maintenance expenses and that start to hit. Some of the variances or all the variances that hit the threshold were we had a space and hangar rentals. And if you look at the other slide later, I've got two numbers next to it. I've got the variance percentage and then the actual dollars that represents. So hangar rentals are off the budget. They're under by 23% or behind $138,000 at this point where they were expected to be. I think that we're going to end up, this is on pace with last year. And I believe this will start to mitigate and start catching up with seasonality in Q3 when we go through the warmer months. Operating salaries are up due to an unbudgeted position that was an addition. So that's 35% over or $58,000, but roughly half of that is offset by the savings on outside professional services, which is down by 65% under budget or $27,000 under budget. Outside professional fees and maintenance expenses are under budget by 91% or $18,000 due to them just being less than anticipated. And again, that's why I did these two criteria where you see something where I say we're 91% under, but it's only $18,000. It's not, $200,000 or something. So as I'm rattling through these, I'm trying to keep an eye on the clock, but if I go too quickly, let me know if you want me to slow down or, okay, I'm going to keep going. Direct G&A was 13% over with which was $11,000 above budget. That's going to be kind of a constant through these because G&A is allocated a fairly consistent amount. Overall operating maintenance costs were under budget by 33%. And this variance, again, is due largely, you'll see it largely mitigate in Q3 is operational seasonality. And then overhead G&A was under by 10% or $51,000 under budget. That is it for the airport. Are there any questions on the airport outside of that variance and kind of how it's doing? Okay. That is the slide where I read everything off. So I'm going to skip through that. That's for you so you can kind of ponder it. And then we're going to get on to the marina. The marina.
Chair, would it be okay if we move to the next slide when he talks about the variances?
It's okay with me.
Is that okay?
Oh, yeah. So that
I just couldn't, if it's okay with you, if we look at the slide when you read it off.
oh, you do want to look at the other slide.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Okay. Absolutely. So I will do it that way. Do you want the other slide up for a minute?
No, I've reviewed it.
Okay. Okay. We're on to the marina. The marina right now is coming in under revenues and under expenses, as I would expect, because their main activity hasn't occurred yet, with total maintenance expense also under, bringing them above and ahead of earnings before depreciation, interest, and overhead expenses. Their variance is $45,000 in the plus. The depreciation is right on schedule, and the general and administrative costs are running about 10% under what was budgeted, which you'll see repeatedly. So let me go on, and as you would like to see them, under the marina, the analysis side, the budgeted general labor revenue of $12.5 thousand has yet to occur. That was an entry that just hasn't occurred yet under that category. So it's likely to occur in Q3. I would say it's 1,000,000% because it was an unbudgeted. It's an item that hasn't occurred yet, so it's 100% or the entire amount off. Fuel sales revenue is running 19% behind or $54,000 under budget. Again, seasonal variance with the expectation to improve in Q3. Operating, we're 12% under cost or $178,000. And maintenance is -7 or $19,000 under. Both are expected to come up or catch up in Q3. And then again, the general G&A is 10% under 51,000 as budgeted. Any question? It's a lot to go through. I'm trying to hit a fine pace of not putting you to sleep and giving you meaningful information. So on to the terminal. This is the star of the evening. To date, and the terminal I believe to be a little less seasonal. Our terminal operator has been out on vacation for the last month, so he's coming back. So I haven't confirmed that with him, but I've had ongoing discussions with him, so I have a pretty good handle on what's been going on. Total operating revenues are running 34% ahead. The budget was just under 3.2 million, and we're hitting almost 4.3 million. So that's 34% over budget at this point. Excuse me. Total operating expenses would be in kind because they go together, so to speak. So if one is up, the other would be expected to go up as well. And that is 30% over budget or $481,000 above what was it budgeted for. Total maintenance expense. This is an area where, again, they are going to be doing more maintenance in the warmer months. So this will come up and bring down some of the high earnings here, or at least as a percentage. So the earnings before depreciation, interest, expense, and overhead, they're 96% above budget right now with an $830,000 plus variance. Depreciation is right on schedule, and general and administrative overhead is running the 10% under. This one has a long list of variances because they're doing so much above budget. So let me read through this as reasonably quickly as I can. They've got a very productive situation going on with international conditions that are favoring the port. Under the revenue specifically, wharfage is up 120%. Or $72,000 above budget. Service and facilities is running 20% or just under $250,000 under. Storage is running 37% under or 13,000 under. Loading and unloading is 171% above budget or $931,000 above. There's a $184,000 in handling that has occurred that was unbudgeted. That is in the positive. Labor is running 45% or $28,000 above budget. Equipment rentals with operators is running, this is on the revenue side, not where would be making money, not us renting the equipment.
Chair, may I ask a question?
Sure.
I don't want to interrupt you, Tad. I know you are trying to strike the fine balance between what we're asking for and I think that we have all reviewed the information and I'm just wondering if it is the best use of time to read it all.
Would you like me to dispose with the specifics?
I'm gonna defer to my fellow commissioners as far as I totally appreciate everything you put into this and we need to be transparent with the public. And if we have questions, we can ask them, but I don't know that we need to read it.
Fair enough. No, that's absolutely fine.
With all due respect though, because I know you put a lot into this information is very important.
Well, but it is available in the presentation slide deck, so you feel free to use it.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to go with the higher level of here is the information with the narrative and the detail. And I'll just give they're doing great. They're well above. There are some areas where they can't be performing as much because they're operating at full tilt, basically. And I would expect that to mitigate a little bit with the increased costs from maintenance and whatnot as seasonality comes in. So we will continue and we'll just go on to the high level with properties. Properties is doing well across the board. They're 38% ahead in their revenues versus what they budgeted. So they're 208 grand above the budgeted 547,000 at the mid-year mark. Operating expenses are also running in lockstep at 38% ahead. So you would expect those to be paired together, basically. Maintenance expenses also are up roughly the same amount, a little bit lower at 36% above budget. But the variance is only 21,000 there, with the actual being 58 versus $79,000. And then the earnings before depreciation, interest, and overhead is running positive of 38%. There is one variance on here that I'm exploring. The general and admin overhead on properties listed them as being under by 28% instead of roughly running the same as the other ones. Now, we did sell the CBC building in Q1 and it closed, and that was originally unbudgeted in this year. And that falling away may have affected and caused this anomaly, but I'm going to research that to make sure that that is a correct figure. If there's something to explain, I'll bring it up in a following meeting, but if it's correct, then I won't say anything other than we're under. And then I will say, this is the analysis through the variance under the properties, but we will dispose with the reading of the specifics and say that it is available for review. And we will go on to environmental being a revenue generating a cost center and not truly an operating unit. I thought it's in the interest of transparency just to see quickly what it is in a similar format. So environmental is pacing a little bit under their budgeted expenses. They're under by 168,000 at the half year mark, and they're floating around $3 million in actual with $3.17 million budgeted costs. So they don't have an earnings, so to speak, but they're running ahead. And then, yes.
And just to make it clear, this is a cost center. It's treated separately because this is like the Bud Bay remediation of historical contamination. This isn't the environmental compliance costs of at the airport or.
No, correct. This is something you really can't see any other way if I don't kind of break it out to look at it. It is not a comparable operating center to the marina or the airport or the other our regular 4 operating units.
What I'm clarifying is that those all have environment compliance costs, all those units, that those environmental compliance costs are attributed to the units. This is the stuff that couldn't be attributed to a unit because it's Bud Bay, or is
Yes,
this
no, this is like Bud Bay.
costs.
You're correct in the first case.
Thank you. I think that's important to note as you're presenting this.
Absolutely.
And if the public were to ask, is the Port of Olympia investing in environmental remediation? In half of the year, we've invested over $3 million.
Yes.
Thank you.
Our interim executive director concurs. And then yes, and then this is a little bit, oops, sorry, next slide. This is a little bit more of the equivalent of the variances that go into that. And again, that is a bit, if it's confusing at all, I can remove that section in the future. I just think for transparency, it's a particularly large amount of something going on for the port that's worth seeing. So
If that, in the future, if you could call it, but if it truly is Bud Bay environmental remediation, if we could call it that. And if it's not, if you could come back to us and let us know what's in it.
okay, okay. Analysis to be looked at individually. Statement of net position. The statement of net position is basically your balance sheet. It's a snapshot in time of what you owe and what you have. There are a few notes on here worth, few points on here worth pointing out. Our cash position right now alone, and this is again at the end of Q2, not today's date, is roughly $31 million in cash, because there are also other assets, current assets in there, putting it at 35.9 at the end of Q2. The balance or the difference of that is GASB 87 recording and receivables. So a bit of a accounting ease, so to speak, on there. Current liabilities consist of the obligations that we are payable within a year, with non-current liabilities and obligations that go beyond a year, such as long-term bond debt. Other liabilities in this case contains GASB 87, as we mentioned, mandated lease liability recognition, OPEB, and pension accounts. One of the big things on here you'll see is non-current liabilities went down by $4.1 million. That is roughly the remediation that we did when we, I'm sorry, not remediation, when we defeased the bond debt. You're going to see that as an effect on here as well. And other than that, we are in a stronger net position than we were in 2023 by roughly $5 million. Any questions? Okay. Financial highlights, and this pertains mostly to finance and not finance across the board with the port. Just to keep in mind what's happened in this quarter, we've gained a new controller. Tricia Miller was hired in May. The $34.5 million cash on hand at quarter end was pre-bond defeasance, which was defeased on July 1st. AR coordinator, our AR coordinator of 29 years, Jan K. Hill, will be greatly missed, has gone on to enjoy what we all hope to get to at some point in our life. And we have a new AR coordinator, Angela Burris, is hired in June, doing a great job. And we finalized our debt defeasance plan with the commission during this time, but then that is all of my highlights. So are there any other questions and occurrences or things that you would like clarification on?
Sounds like we're good.
Okay. There we go.
All right, let's move on to public comment. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment on the 2024 budget update? Q2. No raised hands?
No.
Oh, there is a raised hand?
No.
Oh, there are no raised hands.
Raised hands.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Ted. Moving on to commissioner reports and discussion. Commissioner Sanders, would you like to start? Have any?
I do not have any. I'm just glad to see you guys all again. It seems like it's been a while.
Okay, good. Commissioner Vasab.
Yeah, I guess this is returning from our August break, but several of us were able to attend the Fufara on Friday, just from port property, waving at the boats going by first responders joining, to honor the veterans going out with the yacht club. And it's always nice to see, fellow commissioners as well in a different context. And I think is it Alexandra Schlitter was there on behalf of the Marine Terminal. I think option is still away, and it kind of underscored for me the confidence I have in our current Marine Terminal staff. Confidence that, yeah, the commission is going to be asked to make further investments. I think the more you work with them, the more you see the opportunities there. It was really, I'll leave it in.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Harding.
I was just excited that 2 of our lines of business were coming up in my cocktail conversation. 2 ships at the Marine Terminal. Numerous people texted me and said, "Oh my gosh." That's just, we've been saying it all day, but huge success at the Marine Terminal. And then at the client appreciation event, I got to talk to one of the DNR representatives about all of the activity at the airport, fighting wildfires. The large planes from Eastern Washington were using the Olympia Airport stage for the fire in PL. So just really cool to see that nexus to how the port plays a role in our entire region. So my quote of the day is an anonymous: "You are unlikely to be brave if you have only had wonderful things happen to you."
All right. Okay, no other commission reports or discussion. Is there any other business?
I have one thing to add to the agenda setting calendar. In the presentation from DES, they were talking about yard waste as an ongoing pollutant for Bud Bay. And I'm wondering if there's any opportunities in our environmental communications of doing an education campaign on some of the things that people may not know are negatively impacting our waterways. So something for further discussion if we have communications going out. I think there's a real lack of understanding about people dumping their yard clippings. One of our staff members, Ms. St. Ange, educated me on something else that was polluting that I had no idea. So just opportunities for education as we are communicating the work the port is doing to the public. Certainly. And we can talk more about that as a commission, but just planting a little seed on the yard waste.
All right, very good. Any other business? All right, moving along. Sean, you have done a great job as and you've got one more moment to shine here.
All right, I have a speaking part. Okay, so yeah, here's the upcoming meetings. Next week on the 16th of September, we have a commission work session that's at 3:30. And then the Citizens Advisory Committee is Tuesday, September 17th at 6 p.m. And then we have another couple regular commission meetings. One is Monday, September 23rd at 5:30. And then the October 14th meeting at 5:30 as well.
Sorry, one more comment. We discussed putting a pin in October 14th is Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day. And last year we talked about potentially making that a holiday for our calendar for 2025. And since we've had so much turnover, could you just make a note of that for Executive Director Smith for consideration?
Oh, I like that.
Certainly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we have previously had tribal members come if we had a meeting on that day. So maybe also make a note of that, given that Executive Director Smith is still getting up and running.
Will do.
Thanks, Sean.
Welcome.
All right, any further comments?
I guess for agenda setting as well, Cheryl, we are having questions sometimes from public comment about when we're going to have another, what was it, work session or different. I think having a better, if we can try to pull together information of public engagement we're planning. These are such massive initiatives, and there's been a heavy lift this summer, just getting them rolling. I think as we move into fall, probably we'll be starting to do more of that public engagement, and being able to see in advance what's coming might be helpful. with addressing those concerns.
All right, thank you. Anything else for the good of the order? In that case, this meeting is adjourned. Good job.